What is going on, guys? TKD 1, 2, 3 back video, and talking about another album this week that we reviewed this week. And if you guys are fairly just well aware of this whole thing, you guys know that on Mondays, every Monday, I tweet the album of the week we'll be doing, and I implore you all to listen along with me, just listen throughout the week, and stay tuned for the weekend for my final thoughts. And this is the final thoughts on the album of the week this week. Now, this album came out of the blue last week during a concert I was at, and it was an absolute just distraction for me. It's like, oh man, like this really album, like a really good artist that I love and I've loved for years now, finally dropped her album. And on top of that, it was a long one too, but we're gonna save all that, to the real meat of this video. But going on to who we are reviewing this week, it is none other than Jhene Aiko. I love her to death, and then we're gonna review her album Trip. Now, going into the logistics of the album, it is 22 songs and an hour and 26 minutes long. So it is definitely an album that has a lot of meat in it, has a lot of content in it, and it's something that, I feel is not a deterrent, right? Now, a lot of times you'll hear me saying that, there really does come a point where you release too long of an album, right? Where like, for a great example here, Chris Brown is dropping a double album at the end of October 31st actually, and that is 40 songs long. Now, I feel that is entirely too long, right? That is over the that is just insane, right? But over here with this one, there is at least a justification for it being that long, right? And so it's something where obviously I can, be excited about from an artist that has proven itself, just in the past. But like overall, just looking back on the album, it really doesn't even feel that long. It doesn't feel like an hour and a half. Really, it doesn't. And it's very, very weird for me to say that. It feels like just a regular size album. Like, like it feels like an hour long. It feels like a regular normal size album. It doesn't feel very, very long like it actually is. But let's go into the meat of this. Now, Trip, when you're talking about it, just from a over kind of enveloping standpoint, right? There is a lot of parts to Trip, right? There is the movie that she made with a couple actors and everything that is up on Jhene Aiko, JheneIsPenny.com. I implore you to go check that out. That is an amazing movie and everything. It really does base a lot of itself in the album and everything. And basically from her standpoint, she says that Trip, when you're talking about the movie or the album, is inspired by the poetry she wrote during the 5 years after her brother died, right? Back in 2012, we all know that was a big topic in a lot of her other albums following 2012. It was really, it was just a really big thing that kind of followed her throughout her music and everything, and it was a very, very, just kind of focal point to a lot of the music that she made after 2012. And so this is kind of really breaking all of it down and showing her poetry and everything. And I believe she's coming out with a poetry book towards the end of the year that also revolves around Trip. So when you say, did you listen to Trip, like, I implore you, you gotta look at everything, right? Like, you gotta look at the movie and the album and everything. But today we're gonna focus a little more on the album, and the album is nothing short of amazing. Now, speaking of the features here, we have the usual suspects. We have, of course, Big Sean, and of course 2088. The just greatness that is 2088 is also shown in Only Lovers Left Alive. That song is, oh man, guys, that song's good. Song's real good, right? But of course, Big Sean also lent his great vocals to his album as well. We have Swale as well, along with Dr. Chill, Molly Music and everything. And then lastly, a very, very surprise feature, we have Brandy. Now Brandy, of course, Ray J's sister. I haven't heard her in literally years, but it was very nice to hear, a little bit of Brandy in there. What I'm saying, like, who wouldn't like a little Brandy in there? It's been a minute. I mean, not even a minute. It's been a couple of years at this point. So really, really glad to see her there. And overall, you can have all the features in the world, but there was just something about Jhene Aiko that really does just have the spotlight on her, right? And this whole entire album really is, aside from it just being her album, obviously, but the overall kind of highlightedness of Jhene Aiko in this whole entire album is something that we have seen in the past, and something that continues to persist here today. And that is that, Jhene Aiko steals the album, steals the show. Of course, it's hers already, but she, man, like, you can have any feature, you will not remember the features, you will remember Jhene Aiko in this album. And this is one of these albums where I feel like you cannot just cherry pick songs. There are, of course, a few ones that you can pick and like it, just makes sense and sound okay. But this album, at least on the first listen, and I feel like once you listen to it for the first time and then keep going on afterwards, you will need to listen to it in its full entirety every time. Like, this truly is a story of a trip, right? And of course the title, but this is this really is a big experience, and it's not an album that you can just, you know, pick, oh, I like track 5, track 8, track 11, whatever. No, this is an album that you have to listen to in its full entirety, right? And I don't say that often, right? Because a lot of albums, you know, of course they have a cohesive theme to it, of course they have a narrative to it, but you know, there are albums that have songs that can stand amongst themselves but still go in the same flow. For example, 2014 Forest Hills Drive by J. Cole. You know, you can take each one of those great songs and play them by himself and it'd be fine. But of course, you know, there's different elements when they're played back to front fully. But with this album, I feel like you cannot do that. Like, you cannot just cherry pick songs. You have to listen to it in its full entirety. And right now is on my feed and everything, and what a lot of people are really attaching to a song wise in this album is definitely Only Lovers Left Alive. That's by 2088 and everything. And of course 2088 consists of Jhene Aiko and Big Sean, and that song has a super really good pop vibe. It's great. It's so 2088-esque, and it's what they're going for with that, you know, Big Sean and Jhene Aiko kind of compilation, if you will. And that is, you know, that they are kind of meant to be in the 80s and stuff like that. And it's definitely supposed to have like an 80s sound. Of course, we heard that in their debut album last year, and it definitely does make sense here with this track as well. It definitely does make 100% sense for them to have that going as well here. So it definitely does make sense. And you know, just really the overall takeaway of this album and like what's going on here is that this is a very, very deep, very, very personal story, right? She touches on her brother a ton here, and obviously that's a big focal point here. And she basically describes like what is being described here is, you know, a story about dealing with your inner demons that come out, you know, through drugs, right? And of course that's a very sensitive topic, whatever, but you know, at least for those that can relate, I feel like to a degree people can relate to the feeling that she's feeling, but not a lot of people, I feel, will be able to relate to the drug part. Now some of you will, you know, some of you know, hardcore people will, right? But you know, a lot of people can relate to the pain she's conveying, a lot of people can relate to the lyrics she's putting out, a lot of people can relate to the overall kind of feeling of losing someone close to you, right? And this is basically what is in capitals here, because you know, this type of album is very odd to talk about, especially from right now, because this is what she was feeling a couple of years back, right? Like, this is what, at least what she has said about this album is that like this is what basically she's written in this journal. It's basically what she's written, you know, just in her notebook and everything, and just that overall experience from when he initially died, right? And so I feel like those obviously don't maybe persist right now, but it's still a very, very nice kind of, you know, just kind of hourglass look into, you know, Jhene Aiko as a person, right? Into how, you know, she is doing these things and how she describes some of these things. It's this album is beautiful. And there's this whole narrative that goes on with the album where, you know, she goes on a trip, and not just like a journey trip, but it kind of is a journey. Like, it's a metaphorical journey in a way, but you know, she is also just taking a trip, you know, on drugs and everything, and she meets a guy, and she trusts this guy, and then he starts giving her other drugs, whatever. Then like at one point, which I feel was the kind of climactic part of the album, you know, towards overstimulated and bad trip, is you know, her kind of really downfall into the bad drug, right? Having negative effects, whatever, it really does affect her negatively, and she has really bad trip and everything. And then the overall kind of album takes a way different tone going into that half of the album, because that is where the real, you know, pain lies. That's where the real, you know, narrative, you know, just substance lies, right? There is a lot of stuff in the beginning, but I feel the beginning is a little bit more of a nice, you know, just leading into it, a nice upbeat tone overall. But really the meat of stuff is really the end of the album, I would say, towards the, you know, lower half of the album. But you know, and then she has just a bunch of realizations and everything, and actually a bunch of just great stuff, right? Like, this is just a great lyrical album. This is a great narrative album, and at least in my opinion, I feel like this is her best. Like, you know what I'm saying? I know that's a very bold statement, but you know, when it comes to Sail Out, Sailing Souls, all of her other albums, I feel that Trip definitely does stand on her own, and definitely is a sign of her maturity when it comes to her music creation, when it comes to her way of explaining things that she's feeling. And I feel that overall this is definitely her best work, period. Now, when it comes to my favorite songs on the album, I say Oblivion by far. Oblivion is such a deep, oh, I love that song so much, and the way she just sings that song is just great overall. And it comes after her bad trip, so definitely there is some other, just like, there is definitely a level of tension that comes with that song, because you have her literally screaming over the bad trip on the tracks, you know what I'm saying, like where you know, just the drugs just have her in a bad way, you know, you already have that tension of that, and then bring it into Oblivion, and it's just such a great stunning song. I love that track to death. Then there's of course New Balance, which is also one of my favorites as well. When We Love is also good. Only Lovers Left Alive, I feel like it's gonna be definitely that really big hit amongst the masses. I feel like a lot of people will just definitely feel the vibe of that song, definitely love it overall. And then there's, you know, towards the end of the half, we have a track here called Sing to Me, which features of course her daughter Jhene Aiko, Love and everything, and they have a very cute song and everything. That again was taken from her last album where they also did a song together, and this one is here as well, so definitely did enjoy this song overall. However, I will say maybe one of the album's biggest downfalls, I say, is kind of the outro, right? Because I feel like the outro is a little bit wasted, I feel, just because like you don't realize it's over, you don't realize it's ended, right? But like, it's such a weird outro because you can look at it from a lot of different views and make sense of the outro, make sense of the feel of it, make sense of what she's trying to say here. But I feel like it's not the payoff you expect of this whole album, right? Like I feel like you were to expect something a little bit more with just something a little bit more with just substance and a little bit more of depthness overall. But I feel like the outro kind of lacks in that department a little bit. And of course, there are reasons, of course, why the outro is the outro, of course, you know what I'm saying? Because, you know, I don't see her making this absolutely immaculate, insane album that has so much depth, so much, you know, other reasonings to things, and then to just have like just a regular standard outro just doesn't make sense to me. Of course, there's more to the outro, I feel, that, you know, is maybe just something that's a little more deeper, but I just feel like just from my week of listening to this, I feel like the outro just feels definitely a little more wasted. It feels like there could have been a lot more to do with the outro, but I digress. And overall, man, like, this definitely does make the R&B category for this year very hard to determine which one's the best. Obviously, you guys all know that my runner-ups are definitely, you know, we have Control, we have Elijah Blake's, you know what I'm saying? Like we have a lot of R&B this year, and definitely Trip makes this whole decision difficult to choose which one is the best. But overall, I would say you have to listen to this album. You have to listen to it. You have to watch the movie as well. It's about 20 minutes long. I'm not gonna go into any more details about that, but overall, definitely if you listen to the album and then go listen to the movie, it definitely does add a lot to the actual album. It really does change the perspective that you might not catch on the album. If you listen to the album and then go listen to the movie, there will be a big realization that you didn't even know that was in the album, and it definitely does show after you listen to the movie and everything, and like after you watch the movie, you go back to the album and you definitely do see that kind of change and that shift in what the whole story was intended to be. So I definitely do recommend you guys going and checking out that movie as well. But overall, Jhene Aiko, bravo, you did an insane job. This is absolutely an incredible album, and it definitely does show the personality in this whole album. So definitely do recommend you guys streaming it, Apple Music, Spotify, wherever you want to get it. Definitely do recommend this album wholeheartedly. And that's all I got for you guys. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe, and share down below. Appreciate me. Thanks for watching, and as always, I got you.